Mabuhay! I am Algin K. Villalbesa, a second-year college BS Tourism Management at Kidapawan Doctors Colleges Incorporated. And for today's video, I'm gonna explain to you what is culture, what makes up a culture, and what are the elements of culture. Elements of the culture. Learning objectives. 1. Distinguish material culture and non-material culture. 2. List and define several elements of culture. 3. Describe certain values that distinguish the United States from the other nations. Culture is a symbols, language, beliefs, values, and artifacts that are part of any society. There are two basic components of culture: ideas and symbols on the one hand, and artifacts, material culture on the other. The first type, non-material culture, also known as a symbolic culture, it includes the values, beliefs, symbols, and languages that define a society. Second type, material culture, it includes all society's physical objects, such as its tools and technology, clothing, eating utensils, and means of transportation. These elements of culture are discussed next. Symbols. Every culture is filled with symbols, or things that stand for something else and that often evoke various reactions and emotions. Some symbols are actually types of non-verbal communication, while the other symbols are in fact material objects. Let's look at non-verbal symbol first. A common one is shaking hands, which is done in some societies but not in the others. It is commonly conveying friendship and is used as a sign of both greetings and departure. Probably all societies have non-verbal symbols we call gestures, movements of hands, arms, or other parts of the body that are meant to convey certain ideas or emotions. However, the same gesture can mean one thing in one society and something quite different in another society, according to Axtell 1998. In the United States, if we nod our head up and down, it means yes, and if we shake it back and forth, it means no. In Bulgaria, however, nodding means no, while shaking our heads back and forth means yes. In the United States, if we make an O by putting our thumb and forefinger together, we mean okay, but the same gesture in certain parts of Europe signifies an obscenity. Thumbs up in the United States means great or wonderful, but in Australia, it means the same thing as extending the middle finger in the United States. Certain parts of the Middle East and Asia would be offended if they saw you use your left hand to eat, because they use this left hand for bathroom hygiene. Gestures. These are all signs that we make with our body, such as hand gestures and facial expressions. It is important to know that these gestures also carry meaning. This familiar gesture means okay in the United States, but in certain parts of Europe, it signifies an obscenity. An American using this gesture might be very well greeted with an angry look. Some of our most important symbols are objects. For most Americans, the flag is not just a piece of cloth with red and white stripes and white stars against a field blue. Instead, it is a symbol of freedom and democracy and other American values, and accordingly inspires pride and patriotism. During the Vietnam War, however, the flag became to many Americans a symbol of war and imperialism. Some burned the flag in protest, prompting angry attacks by the slanders and negative coverage by the new media. Languages. It is the most important set of symbols. In English, the word chair means something we sit on. In Spanish, the word silla means the same thing. As long as we agree on how to interpret these words, a shared language and thus society is possible. By the same token, difference in languages can make it quite difficult to communicate. Example, imagine you are a foreign country where you do not know the languages and the country's citizen do not know words. Worse yet, you forget to bring your dictionary that translates their language into words, and vice versa, and your iPhone battery have died. You became lost. How will you get help? What will you do? Is there any way to communicate your flight? Languages is crucial to communication and thus to any society's culture. Children learn languages from their culture just as they learn about shaking hands, gestures, and significance of flag and other symbols. Humans have capacity for language that no other animal species possesses. Our capacity for language, in turn, helps make our complex culture possible. To what extent does language influence how we think and how we perceive the social and physical worlds? The famous but controversial Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is named after two linguistic anthropologists, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. Argues that people cannot easily understand concepts and objects unless their language contains words for this item, according to Whorf 1956. Language thus influences how we understand the world around us. Example, people in a country such as United States that has many terms for different types of kisses. Example, bus, peck, smack, smooch, and so are better able to appreciate these different types than people in a country such as Japan, which as we saw earlier, only fairly recently developed the word kiss for a kiss. Another illustration is seen in the sexist language, in which the use of male nouns and pronouns shapes how we think about the world, according to Miles 2008. In older children's book, words like fireman and mailman are common along pictures of men in these jobs, and critics say that they send a message to children that these are male jobs, not female jobs. If a teacher tells a second grade class, every student should put his books under his desk, the teacher obviously means students of both sexes, but may be sending a subtitle message that boys matter more than girls. Examples of sexist term and non-sexist alternatives: the terms businessman, fireman, chairman, policeman, mailman, mankind, man-made, waitress, he as a genetic pronoun, and lastly, a professor should be devoted to his students are the alternatives: businessperson, executive, firefighter, chair, chairperson, police officer, letter carrier, postal worker, humankind, people, artificial, synthetic, server, he or she or he. Professors should be devoted to their students. Norms. Cultures differ widely in their norms, standards, and expectation for behavior. Norms are specific to our culture, period, and situation. Norms are often divided into two types. 1. Formal norms, also called mores and laws, refer to the standard of behavior considered the most important in any society. Example, in the United States, include the traffic laws, criminal codes, and at college context, student behavior codes addressing such things as cheating and hate speech. Second, informal norms, also called folk ways and customs, refer to the standard of behavior that are considered less important but still influence how we behave. Example, table manners, and are such everyday behaviors as we interact with a cashier and how we run in an elevator. Many norms differ dramatically from one culture to the next. Some of the best evidences for cultural variation in norms comes from the study of sexual behavior, according to Egerton, 1976. Other evidences for cultural variation in norms comes from the study of how men and women are expected to behave in various societies. For example, many traditional societies are simple hunting and gathering societies. In most of this, men tend to hunt and women tend to gather. Many observers attribute this gender difference to at least two biological differences between sexes. First, Men tend to be bigger and stronger than women and are thus better suited for hunting. Second, a woman became pregnant and their children are less able to hunt, but a yet different pattern emerges in some hunting and gathering societies. Among a group of Australian Aborigines called the Tweety and tribal society in the Philippines called the Agta, both sexes hunt. After becoming pregnant, Agta women continue to hunt for days for their pregnancy and resume hunting after their child is born, according to Bretel and Sargent 2009. Rituals. Different cultures also have different rituals or established procedures and ceremonies that often mark transition in life course. As such, rituals both reflect or transmit a culture's norms and other elements from one generation to the next. Graduation ceremonies in college and universities are familiar examples of time-honored rituals. In many societies, rituals help signify one's gender identity. For example, girls around the world undergo various types of initiation ceremonies to mark their transition to adulthood. In some cultures, special ceremonies also mark a girl's first menstrual period. Such ceremonies are largely absent in the United States, where a girl's first period in private matter, but in other cultures, the first period is a cause for celebration, involving gifts, music, and food, according to Hathaway, 1997. Changing norms and beliefs. Our examples show that different cultures have different norms, even if they share another types of practices and beliefs. It is also true that norms change over time within a given culture. Two obvious examples here are hairstyles and clothing styles. When the Beatles first became popular in the early 1960s, their hair barely covered their ears, but parents of teenagers back then were aghast at the how look. If anything, clothing styles change even more often than hairstyles. Hemlines go up, hemlines go down. Lapels become wider, lapels become narrower. This color is in, that color is out. Hold on or you're out of styles clothes long enough and eventually they may be end up back in style. Individualism in the US. In the United States, of course, the situation is quite different. The American culture extols the rights of individual and promotes competition in the business and sports worlds and other areas of life. Lawsuits over the most frivolous of issues are quite common and even expected. Phrases like "look out for number one" abound. If the Japanese value harmony and group feeling, Americans value competition and individualism. Because the Japanese value harmony, their norms frown on self-assertion in interpersonal relationship and on lawsuits to correct perceived wrongs. Because American value and even thrive on competition, our norms promote assertion in relationship and certainly promote the use of the law to address all kinds of problems. The work ethic. Another important value in American culture is work ethic. By the 19th century, Americans had come to view hard work not just as something that had to be done, but as something morally good to do, according to Gini 2000. The commitment to the work ethic remains strong today. In the 2008 General Social Service, 72% of respondents said that they would continue to work even if they got enough money to live as comfortably as they would like for the rest of their lives. Artifacts. The last element of culture is artifacts, or material objects, that constitute a society's material culture. In the most simple societies, artifacts are largely limited to a few tools, the hats people live in, and the clothing they wear. One of the most important inventions in the evolution society was the wheel. Although the wheel was a great invention, artifacts are much more numerous and complex in industrial societies. Because of technological advances during the past 2 decades, many societies, such today, may be said to have a wireless culture as smartphones, notebooks, laptops, and GPS devices now dominate so much of modern life. The artifacts associated with this culture were unknown a generation ago. Technological development created these artifacts and new languages to describe them and the functions they perform. Today's wireless artifacts in turn help reinforce our commitment to wireless technology as a way of life, if only because children are now growing up with them, often even before they can read and write. Sometimes, people in one society may find it difficult to understand artifacts that are an important part of another society's culture. If a member of a tribal society who had never seen a cell phone or had never even used batteries or electricity were somehow to visit the United States, she or he would probably have no idea of what a cell phone was or its importance in almost everything we do these days. Conversely, if we were to visit that person's society, we might not appreciate the importance of some of its artifacts. So the key takeaways in this topic, the major elements of culture are symbols, language, norms, values, and artifacts. Language makes effective social interaction possible and influences how people conceive of concepts and objects. Lastly, major values that distinguish the United States include individualism, competition, and commitment to the work ethic. So that's all for today's video. Thank you for watching. Bye!